Hey guys, tonight we're plunging into the wild expanses of the Mongol steppes, where the grass stretches like an endless ocean, the wind whistles past in sharp whistles, and the horizon seems to ripple with heat and possibility. You're trudging alongside a band of hardy nomads, their horses pawing the earth in yurts, round, sturdy tents, pitching like islands in this green sea. But here's the kicker: these nomads have no castles, not a single towering stone fortress looming over the landscape. And if you think you'd like to cozy up in a castle's thick walls after a day of cold winds and fierce raids, think again. The Mongols would probably laugh and then gallop away faster than you can say moat. You probably won't survive shifting steppe life, clutching a castle's flagstone stairway, but the Mongols thrived, and they did it with yurts. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, I'd love it if you post your location and local time below. It's always fascinating to see where on earth we're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture this: the Mongol steppe sprawling across Central Asia, a vast, windswept grassland where survival depends on speed, adaptability, and knowing that home isn't a place carved in stone, but something portable, something you can pack up faster than a knight can unsheathe his sword. The Mongols are the masters of the move. Their lives revolve around the seasons, their herds, and the endless horizon. And the yurt, a circular, lattice-walled tent covered in felt, is their perfect domicile. It's not just a tent, it's a marvel of design tuned by centuries of trial, error, and practical needs. But why yak your mind over yurts rather than castles? Because looking at their choice reveals a world of strategy, culture, and survival on a scale few have truly grasped. You see, castles symbolize power and permanence for sedentary societies, often built to dominate a landscape and the people on it. But the Mongols, they needed something mobile, easy to erect or dismantle, light enough to carry but tough enough to stand against fierce winds, rains, and snow. Imagine trying to pull a massive stone fortress behind your horse as you gallop across steppes stretching thousands of miles. Spoiler alert, not going to work. Historians still argue whether the Mongols ever seriously considered adopting fixed fortifications, or if their immense reliance on horseback mobility made such ideas impractical from the start. Yurts became more than just shelter, they were a cultural cornerstone. Inside those wooden lattices stretched tight with felt, Mongols folded their lives, cooking, sleeping, strategizing, storytelling, all under the same circular sky. While castles needed armies to build and defend, yurts required a family's hands and community spirit. Think of yurts like the original pop-up homes, minus the Instagram filter. As we dip our toes into this fascinating contrast, yurts versus castles, we open a door to understanding a civilization that thrived without bricks and mortar, but with resilience, innovation, and an unerring sense for what kind of home truly worked on the steppe. So hang tight, and let's unravel the anatomy of a yurt next, where round walls hide some seriously clever engineering. Let's dive headfirst into the anatomy of a yurt, that iconic round tent whose humble appearance hides a surprisingly high-tech design. You're probably picturing just a simple tent made of wood and felt, but wait, there's engineering wizardry built into that cozy, snowy white dome. The yurt isn't just a shelter, it's a portable fortress against the elements, a home that's been fine tuned over centuries to balance durability, mobility, and comfort. Now, imagine you have to build a house that weighs under 400 kilograms but can withstand Mongolian winter gales icy enough to freeze your eyelashes and summer heat that makes the grass seem to scream. That's a tall order, right? Yet these round homes have done exactly that, season after season, for generations. At the base is the khana, a lattice wall built from long, slatted wooden strips. You've probably seen these in action on YouTube. People unfold them like giant wooden accordions. This lattice wall is not just for structure, it's the yurt's secret weapon for flexibility. The wood bends and sways, so when fierce steppe winds howl, the yurt doesn't collapse but dances with the gusts. This flexibility is the exact opposite of those rigid stone walls you'd see in castles, which, while mighty, could crack or crumble under pressure. Historians still argue whether the design of the yurt's lattice was influenced by natural forces, or if it was discovered purely through iterative craft wisdom. Next up, the uni, a crown ring at the yurt's top that supports the roof poles. These poles, called karage, radiate out like spokes on a giant wheel and connect the lattice walls to the crown. What you get is an incredibly stable dome shape that distributes weight evenly and handles snow loads way better than any flat roof castle could manage. The uni also has a central opening called the tunduk, which acts like a chimney letting out smoke from the stove inside and letting stars peek through at night. You're basically sleeping under a nightlight curated by nature. Now layer this wooden skeleton in thick felt made from compressed sheep's wool, which does double duty as insulation and weatherproofing. Felt is surprisingly high-tech. It's breathable, repels water, and traps heat. Sheep wool actually contains lanolin, a natural wax, so it sheds rainwater like a duck in a pond. Plus, felt absorbs moisture without getting clammy, so inside your yurt, the air stays comfy. The felt was custom made, treated, and layered in various densities depending on the season. If you're imagining yourself cozying up in a yurt right now, you're probably more comfortable than a modern tent camper in Patagonia today. And here's a quirky tidbit. The yurt's wooden framework isn't nailed or glued together. Instead, it's laced and tied with leather thongs, which means the entire structure can be disassembled, rolled up into bundles, and transported on pack animals or even camels, ready to be reassembled within a couple of hours. You might call it the ultimate ancient DIY home kit. This portability is key because Mongols didn't just want a tent, they wanted a home that traveled as fast as their horses. Inside, the furnishings are arranged with symbolic precision. The eastern side usually holds the altar and sacred objects, while the right and left walls are for guests, family, and livestock. This spatial organization wasn't random, it reinforced Mongol social order and beliefs. Historians still argue about how these interior layouts evolved over time, or whether spiritual meanings shaped the design choices consciously. The yurt is remarkably energy efficient too. Smoke from the stove circulates underneath the felt roof before exiting the tunduk, warming the roof's lattice and reducing heat loss. A castle's stone walls, in contrast, would absorb heat during the day but release it painfully slowly, leading to damp, chilly interiors. You could say yurts were early masters of passive heating, all without a single solar panel. What about decorations? Often, the yurt's exterior was left plain, blending into the endless grasslands, but inside you'd find expert embroidery, painted wooden furniture, and bright textiles, proof that the Mongols didn't compromise on aesthetics, despite the utilitarian exterior. Some scholars suggest this made yurts more than homes. They were living artworks, portable sanctuaries reflecting the tribe's identity. So, as you feel the warmth of this elegant bubble nestled in the steppe, it's clear the yurt isn't just a tent, it's a technological feat, wrapped in layers of wool and wood, perfectly tuned to its environment. It's an ancient, nomadic smart home that castles could only dream about. Next up, why castles, despite their might and majesty, just can't compete on the steppe. Now that you've felt the sturdy yet flexible embrace of the yurt's design, let's pin down why castles, those stone giants so adored in medieval movies, just didn't cut it on the vast, windy steppes. Castles might have been the go-to architectural flex for European kings and nobles, but for the Mongols ruling the open grasslands, castles were more like awkward, heavy suits of armor in a world that demanded nimbleness and adaptability. Imagine trying to build a castle in the middle of an endless sea of grass, where temperatures swing from scorching summer heat to winter nights so cold they turn your breath into silver clouds. Stone, the primary castle material, offers durability and defense, but it's also heavy, slow to construct, and rigidly fixed to one location. The Mongols prized mobility above all because their way of life involved following their herds across thousands of miles. A castle can't chase grass. It waits for the grass to come to it, and the grass usually doesn't. The climate on the steppe is no joke. Wind speeds can gust up to 70 miles per hour, and temperatures can drop below minus 40 degrees Celsius. The thick stone walls of a castle have high thermal inertia, meaning they absorb heat slowly, but also release it slowly, which can be a problem if you want quick warmth or cooling. Plus, castles needed sizable fireplaces and chimneys to heat those massive stone rooms, which were hard to keep smoke-free and warm. Ever had a chilly stone floor creep into your bones? Yep, exactly the vibe. Yurts, on the other hand, with their felt insulation and domed shape, could heat up quickly and retain warmth with less fuel. Historians still argue whether the quick adaptability of yurt setups was a cultural choice or simply an environmental necessity, but the evidence points to these advantages being crucial. Then there's construction speed. Building a castle was an enormous, time-consuming effort, sometimes taking years, maybe decades. That's simply incompatible with a nomadic lifestyle where the family or tribe might move multiple times a year. The Mongols were expert carpenters and craftsmen, yes, but their priorities favored lightweight, packable homes, not fortress grade dwellings cemented to one spot. Plus, castles require local quarries and skilled masons, neither of which the Mongols had readily accessible on the steppe. Their neighbors, like the Chinese and Persians, had plenty of stone and brick, as well as vast permanent cities, but these architectural luxuries didn't translate well into the mobile Mongol identity. This mismatch of resources and lifestyle further explains the yurt's supremacy. Castles also didn't offer the same cultural and spiritual flexibility. The yurt's circular form, with its central hearth and open skylight, symbolized the cosmos and Mongol spirituality, embedding the home in a sacred framework. By contrast, castles, with their angular walls and cold stone, could feel more like cold military installations than warm family centers. Some scholars debate whether this spiritual symbolism was a conscious design driver or a happy accident. The castle's rigid walls also posed tactical disadvantages against the Mongols, as Mongol armies were mobile and preferred to avoid prolonged sieges, something that helped shape their disdain for fortress life. The Mongols rarely bothered to settle down in castles captured from enemies, instead preferring to burn or bypass them entirely. Some castles, though, were modified to resist Mongol tactics, showing a back and forth of military adaptation. And here's a quirky side note. Some Mongol tribes reportedly scorned castles because they saw them as prisons, houses that restrained their freedom and tethered them to one place. There's even a legend of a Mongol warrior who called castles the parted fortress that cages the spirit, so they stuck to their yurts, which let your soul roam. Whether romanticized or factual, this highlights the psychological connection Mongols had with their homes. Another problem with castles, the moat and heavy gates that might work well in forested or mountainous lands, just turn into treacherous ice traps or mud pits on the steppe, especially during spring thaw. Mongol life had no use for soggy moats or giant stone drawbridges that weighed tons and took forever to open. Finally, let's not forget the strategic mobility that castles sacrificed. Unlike forts or castles, the yurt camp could pack up and relocate with no loss of comfort or security. The entire Mongol tribe could be en route in a day, leaving enemies staring helplessly at an empty fortress on a barren hillside. Put simply, castles are immovable fortresses rooted in the soil, while yurts are living machines of motion. The yurt's design is a masterstroke of cultural adaptation to landscape and lifestyle, shaped by the harsh whispers of steppe winds, the demands of survival, and the fierce independence of the nomadic spirit. Up next, how the horse, a Mongol's best friend and fastest mode of transport, further reinforced yurts over castles. Because, spoiler alert, a castle can't saddle up. You already know that castles just weren't built for Mongol mobility, but what really cements the Mongol lifestyle is their legendary relationship with horses, that four-legged firebird of their culture, speed, and survival. The Mongols' deep bond with their horses shaped everything about their way of life, including their housing choices. After all, if your best friend and most trusted tool gallops, your home better be able to gallop too, or at least follow the herd without breaking a sweat. Picture yourself on the vast, silent steppe, the horizon melting into endless grass and sky. Your horse is your lifeline, your taxi, pantry, and bodyguard all in one. Mongol horses weren't massive, unlike the war horses Europeans rode. They were small but tough. These ponies could survive on sparse grass, travel miles without tiring, and handle bitter winters covered in thick coats. You and your horse share a simmering connection, and for the Mongols, horses were practically family. In fact, historians still argue whether Mongol equestrian superiority was mainly due to breeding or their unique horsemanship techniques. It was probably both. Now, why does this matter for yurts versus castles? Because the horse demands mobility. As a Mongol, you live for the ride, the dash across the prairie, and the dawn raids that need rapid movement. Where's the castle in that? Stuck like a statue, a castle is a resting point for those who prefer to stay put, not the fast-moving Mongol warrior. Horses and yurts are symbiotic in this lifestyle. The yurt's design features fully disassemblable components piled into manageable bundles, each able to be strapped onto horses or loaded on pack animals. Imagine breaking down a tent, rolling up felt sheets, and removing the lattice wall. This is yurt logistics in a nutshell. Got more horses, move faster, and take more stuff. Fewer horses, go light and quick. Yurts literally pack in your survival kit and follow you wherever the herds graze or battle lines shift. There's a quirky tidbit. Mongol warriors were said to carry extra horse skulls during campaigns, which they believed brought good luck. They'd even mount them at camp entrances, a spectral tribute to the animals that bore them to victory. Such horse reverence goes beyond practicality into ritual and identity, reinforcing why homes too must honor this bond by being equine friendly. Interestingly, castles had stables but never considered them integral parts of home construction in the way Mongols considered their mobility. European knights were encumbered by horses that required substantial fodder, water, and stabling infrastructure. Meanwhile, Mongol horses grazed freely during migrations or campaigns, requiring minimal maintenance. This fundamental difference in animal handling contributed to the Mongols' promulgation of mobile homes. Mongol horsemanship was famously efficient. Riders could sleep semi-sitting on horseback, drink from river streams using a bamboo tube without dismounting, and shoot arrows with deadly accuracy at full gallop. Having a fixed home thwarted such fluidity. This is why historians debate whether the Mongol reliance on horses is best seen purely through the lens of military prowess or a holistic cultural strategy blending survival and spirituality. Interestingly, some accounts suggest that Mongol youths trained with wooden bows and practiced packing yurts from an early age, combining horsemanship with the rhythms of portable living. This intertwined education between horse and yurt echoes through their life cycle, emphasizing communal and familial tightness. Meanwhile, castles tended to represent control, fixed power centers in a landscape typified by roads, markets, and steady governance. The Mongol horse and yurt culture, by contrast, represented freedom, flexibility, and a joyous, defiantly wild existence. A castle might house a lord, but a yurt housed a nation on the move. In military campaigns, the Mongol cavalry's speed was unmatched, often arriving where enemies least expected. Their ability to strike swiftly and vanish was partially supported by their easily transportable homes, which could be packed and moved as fast as the horses themselves. So, yurts doubled as mobile command centers and survivable sanctuaries. To recap this horse yurt connection, the Mongol horse isn't just a beast of burden, but the architect of Mongol mobility and home life. Their bundled tents move at the horse's pace, their hearts beating to the rhythm of hoofbeats across the grass. Castles might be impressive on a map or in stone, but on a horse that never tires, the yurt is king. Next up, get ready to explore the yurt construction rituals, those delicate dances of family, community, and some secret engineering wizardry that you never knew went into assembling that humble, cozy tent. Now that you've galloped alongside the Mongol horses and glimpsed why yurts outmatch castles for the steppe nomad, let's dive headfirst into the actual craft of building one of these marvels. The yurt construction rituals. You might think it's as simple as unfolding a giant camping tent, but no, there's an intricate choreography here between family, community, and some handy engineering secrets slipstreamed through generations. First, imagine you're part of a Mongol family, circling under a pale blue sky, surrounded by the endless sea of grass and a thin wind teasing the edges of your future shelter. Pulling down branches or unpacking latticed wooden panels isn't a solo job. Building a yurt is a communal event, with each member playing a role, from children handed small tasks like carrying felt bundles to elders advising on the right tension in ropes. Historians still argue whether the exact rituals surrounding yurt assembly were primarily practical or bore a profound spiritual dimension. In some accounts, the act of raising the yurt is likened to a symbolic rebirth, where the circular frame and roof poles represent the world's order and balance. As parts click into place, the wooden crown, called the tuno, in the center, supporting roof poles radiating outward, lattice walls rising around, you can almost hear ancient whispered prayers woven into the rhythm. The construction begins with unpacking the lattice wall frames, called kana. Each piece slides together in an accordion-like fashion, folding flat for storage but springing out sturdy and flexible when expanded. They're made of lightweight wood, crafted not just for strength, but also for breathability, which helps regulate the yurt interior's temperature. Around this wall circle, horses or camels haul rolled up felt, layers of thick wool processed from sheep, which form the insulating cover. This felt insulation is no mere fabric, it's a miracle of nature's engineering. Made by rolling wool repeatedly and felting it until dense and weatherproof, it's astonishingly lightweight yet robust. And it's not just shoved over the walls haphazardly. The felt layers are wrapped carefully with overlapping seams to repel rain and wind. There's a bit of a mystery here because Mongol felt makers often keep their methods secret, passing them down within clan lines. Some anthropologists even suggest that the magical longevity of Mongol felt is allied to tiny traces of animal lanolin that function naturally like water repellents. Talk about natural nanotech. A quirky tidbit in Mongol tradition, the wooden door frame of a yurt is considered a threshold between the human and spiritual worlds and is often decorated with symbolic carvings or painted bright colors. Some families build tiny figurines or charms on the doorframe to ward off evil spirits, proof that this tent is more than just a portable house. It's a home with personality and protection. Socially, erecting a yurt requires cooperation beyond just the family. Across Mongol communities, neighbors often pitch in to help with larger moves or rebuilding after storms. This mutual aid keeps traditions alive and reassures people that their nomadic lives are tethered to deep community bonds, despite the apparent solitude of prairie life. Speaking of engineering, one of the stealthy design elements often overlooked is how the roof poles distribute weight. The meeting point, the tonneau, a round wooden ring atop the yurt, is a marvel of balance. It ensures even tension from the poles, preventing the structure from collapsing under snow or strong winds. Plus, the tonneau doubles as a chimney or smoke hole during the winter months when a fire burns inside. This means the yurt breathes, venting smoke yet locking in warmth, a smart ventilation trick that even some high-tech tents today try to copy. Meanwhile, castles obviously had more permanent structural engineering feats going on: masonry walls, moats, and battlements. But the yurt's ingenuity comes from its simplicity and precision. Like a well-tuned watch, every part fits logically and efficiently without waste. Historians still argue whether this design evolved purely for practicality or was also spiritually inspired by the cosmology of nomadic peoples. Interestingly, the entire yurt assembly process can be completed in just a few hours, sometimes under 2 on an experienced day. There's a speed and grace here that's the opposite of castle construction projects spanning years and armies of laborers. And for a bit of a joke near this silent work, imagine a medieval European lord watching a Mongol family whipping up a fully formed castle from a few bundles of wood and felt in less than the time it takes to polish his armor. He'd probably think magic was involved or accuse them of witchcraft, when in reality it's just centuries of practiced know-how. Remember that horse skull luck charm from earlier? Sometimes family members place small charms or special stones inside the yurt framework during assembly for blessing and protection, a quiet fusion of technology and tradition. So, from unpacking the lattice walls to draping the woolen blankets, crafting the tonneau, and ritualizing the door frame, yurt building is a communal dance that connects people physically and spiritually to their environment and each other. It's a home that literally grows from hands and hearts, designed for movement yet anchored in culture. Next, let's check out how these yurts perform as weather warriors, battling the steppes' notorious extremes where no castle could comfortably survive without huge upkeep. You step outside your freshly assembled yurt, feeling the breeze shift swiftly across the Mongolian steppe. This landscape is no gentle meadow. Think of it as a giant open air oven in summer and a frost-bitten tundra in winter. The weather here is a villain with 1,000 faces, and yurts are among the few homes that have learned to stare it down without surrendering. Castles might look impressive with their cold stone walls, but honestly, when it comes to handling the brutal steppe climate, yurts are the real weather warriors. Let's start with summer. The sun blazes down relentlessly, turning the grasslands into crackling gold. Unlike stone castles that hold heat all day like a giant microwave, yurts are surprisingly breathable. Their wooden lattice frames allow the walls a bit of flexibility, and the felt covering, yes, that thick wool felt you learned about, is surprisingly good at insulating not just from cold, but heat. Historians still argue whether Mongols specifically designed their yurts with summer cooling in mind, or if this was a side effect of prioritizing winter insulation. Either way, you'll find that inside a yurt, the temperature remains markedly cooler than the blistering outside. The felt's moisture wicking properties are a big part of that. Wool can absorb up to 30% of its weight in water without feeling damp, meaning early morning dew or even light rain doesn't leave you soaked inside. Plus, the yurt's circular shape encourages airflow. Any slight breeze funnels around rather than stagnates, so you avoid that hot, stuffy tent vibe you might expect. Now shift your gaze to winter, and suddenly the steppe is an unforgiving tundra. Temperatures plunge well below freezing, snow blankets the grass, and icy winds scream across the endless plains. Castles, with their heavy stone, are naturally cold and require massive fireplaces, but their thick walls also absorb and slowly radiate cold after the fire burns out. They're more like giant ice cubes dressed in soot. By contrast, yurts are built to breathe warmth. The felt and wool layers trap heat efficiently, and the slightly domed roof prevents snow from piling up excessively, reducing heat loss. Inside, Mongols ignite small hearths whose smoke escapes through the tonneau, carefully managing to maintain warmth without smoking out the occupants. A neat, simple ventilation system that even today's architects would admire. A less mainstream fact, some researchers have pointed out that certain Mongol yurts had additional insulating layers made of animal skins or even dried dung mats. While this might sound gross to modern ears, the dung is surprisingly effective as an insulating and waterproofing material. Plus, it was plentiful and free. This little reminder of eco-friendly resourcefulness often surprises those used to gleaming modern materials. Historians still argue whether the yurt's thermal efficiency would outmatch early European stone homes or whether the differences were more about lifestyle than pure comfort. The nomadic Mongols accepted brief exposure to cold or heat because they were constantly on the move, while castle dwellers could hunker down for months at a time. The yurt was designed to balance comfort with mobility, not to create perfect environmental control. Wind is another beast the yurt faces daily. Steppe winds can roar like a freight train, trying to tear everything to shreds. You probably won't survive this, if you build a stationary home here with flimsy materials. Enter the yurt's aerodynamic design. Its rounded shape invites wind to flow smoothly over the structure rather than slam into flat walls. This reduces stress and prevents catastrophic damage. Extra sturdy ropes, often made from horsehair or braided sinew, tie down the entire assembly, anchored by heavy stones buried around the perimeter, securing the yurt like a ship's anchor. You can imagine the Mongols chuckling as a gust tries to lift their portable home, only to fail spectacularly because of thoughtful engineering. Here's a quirky detail. During particularly windy storms, Mongols would sometimes anchor extra weights on top of the felt roof or drape additional animal skins for reinforcement. This adaptability means the yurt's design wasn't rigid, but flexible, willing to evolve with the climate's mood swings. Contrast that with a castle whose thick stone walls and towers would feel downright brittle in a tornado. What about rain? Heavy steppe rainstorms are less common, but still striking, and here the yurt excels with the overlapping felt layers repelling water. Because wool fibers are naturally coated in lanolin, water beads up, rolling off rather than soaking through. In contrast, castles had to rely on steeply pitched tile roofs and sophisticated drainage systems to prevent leaks. But let's not pretend yurts are perfect. They do require regular maintenance. Felt clings and covers may need replacing every few years, especially after rainy seasons. Plus, long storms or heavy snow can strain the structure if not managed properly. Still, given the alternatives, yurts are remarkably resilient. Beyond just physical weather defense, yurts also serve social and psychological functions during climate extremes. Mongols would gather inside during harsh weather, their close quarters and warmth fostering social bonds that kept spirits high despite external hardship. Castle walls may be thicker, but can they embrace the warmth of a shared fire and storytelling circle as intimately? To sum it up, yurts are weather warriors par excellence. Their design balances breathability, insulation, wind resistance, and moisture control, all tailored perfectly for the steppe's extremes. Castles are impressive monuments, sure, but try lugging a castle across sub-zero tundra with pack horses. You'll learn quickly why yurts won this battle of climate fitness. And there's a bit of a classic irony here. Those impressive stone fortresses built for defense against enemies just can't hold up as well against Mother Nature's fury in Mongolia. The Mongols traded permanent, impenetrable walls for flexible, breathable, and mobile yurts built to harmonize with their environment. That's architectural philosophy with teeth. Now, you remember the subtle engineering of the tuno back in Section 5? It's really the unsung hero here, not just supporting the roof, but managing heat and smoke. Such a multitasking design is part of what makes yurts so incredibly clever. Next, let's mount our horses again and ride into the Mongol military camps, where yurts weren't just homes, but strategic mobile bases for one of history's greatest armies. As you settle back in the saddle, the vast steppes stretch endlessly, dust swirling along the horizon where the Mongol army, like a living creature, moves with fluid grace. The warriors you glimpse camped ahead don't just toss down any old tent. They deploy yurts arranged in carefully measured circles and clusters. These aren't random gatherings, they're the mobile heartbeat of the Mongol military machine, and yurts play a crucial, multifaceted role here, far beyond simple shelter. Think of the yurt as the equivalent of a modern military field base, but instead of cold metal and concrete, you have an ingenious combination of lightweight wood, felt, and rope that can be assembled or dismantled in mere hours. This speed was indispensable in a culture where the difference between victory and defeat often depended on outmaneuvering the enemy, even if that meant striking before dawn or vanishing into the vast emptiness like ghosts. Castles, with their stone fortifications, couldn't dream of that kind of pace. Historians still argue about the exact tactical advantages yurts gave the Mongol armies, but almost all agree that mobility was fundamental. Instead of being tied down to a fortress, the Mongols traveled with their entire households, livestock, and supplies packed into compact yurt caravans. When halted for the night, or even a few hours, setting up these homes wasn't just about comfort, it was a show of military precision. A lesser known tidbit: the Mongols arranged their yurts in distinct patterns during wartime, often in circular or semicircular formations that served both as defense and communication networks. Each yurt's position was carefully selected to preserve sightlines, facilitate rapid troop movements, and protect key family members or officers. These formations were more than furniture on the grass. They were tactical deployments encoded into daily life. The speed of setting up and breaking down was truly impressive. A skilled team could erect a yurt in under an hour, amazing when you consider that this involved unrolling felt skins, raising the wooden lattice walls, fixing the roof, and securing everything tightly against the steppe winds. This operational efficiency gave the Mongol army a unique edge in long campaigns, as they could pack up their entire world and move on without wasting precious time. Another quirky feature: in some battles, yurts were intentionally burned or dismantled quickly to deny cover or resources to pursuing enemies. This scorched earth approach to mobile living annoyed their opponents, who might be left staring helplessly at clouds of dust and a ghostly emptiness where a camp had been just hours earlier. It's like the Mongols invented the ancient version of now you see me, now you don't real estate. This practicality contrasts jarringly with castle warfare, where sieges could drag on for months or years. The Mongols just didn't have time for that kind of static defense. Their yurts allowed constant movement and flexibility, essential for hit-and-run tactics that devastated more stationary armies decades later. Interestingly, the yurt's very design accommodated quick troop mobilization. The circular layout meant no corners or wasted space. Every inch served a purpose. It also encouraged social cohesion. Soldiers grouped with their families, cooking and tending to horses nearby, fostering morale and loyalty. After all, war is as much about human psychology as it is about steel and arrows. Historians still argue whether some of these camp arrangements might be early precursors to organized field fortifications later seen in other nomadic societies, or whether they remained uniquely Mongol innovations without direct successors. Regardless, their efficiency and simplicity remain impressive. There's also a thermal warrior angle here. Remember how yurts handle climate extremes? In the chaos of war, exhausted horses, tired soldiers, shifting weather, that ability to provide a stable, warm, or cool environment literally meant life or death. Better rested troops meant faster rides, sharper attacks, and the tuno, don't forget it, was especially critical in military camps, allowing smoky fires for warmth or cooking without suffocating the inhabitants. In fact, some military accounts mention that the tuno had to be regularly cleared to keep the camp healthy, especially during extended campaigns. Did you know Mongol generals sometimes used the position and color of yurts for signaling? A crimson yurt might mark the commander's tent, visible even at a distance, aiding coordination in a sprawling, moving camp. It's like ancient GPS before wireless networks, crucial for orchestrating the famous Mongol cavalry charges. In contrast, castle commanders' quarters were locked inside stone walls, but lacked that lively mobility. When sieges turned messy, those commanders were stuck with slow, inflexible communication and had fewer chances to reposition their forces. The use of yurts in military camps also reflects the Mongol emphasis on speed and surprise. They never wanted to be pinned down, always ready to remount and head out as the situation changed. The yurt wasn't just home, it was a tactical tool embedded in their entire way of life. As the sun dips lower, you can almost hear the crackling of fires within these semicircular yurt forts, the murmurs of soldiers warming themselves, the neighing of horses curbed by quick hands. It's a moment where architecture, culture, and military strategy blend perfectly. So next time you imagine Mongol warriors, think less about grim fortresses and more about these cozy circles of felt and lattice, moving like shadows across the grasslands, always ready to rise and ride. Now, we'll linger inside those yurts and uncover why Mongol hearts beat so strongly within these portable homes, the deep sense of belonging and peace found only where home and heritage meet. You slide gently into one of those yurts, pushing aside the thick felt flap as dusk paints the step in hazy pinks and purples. Inside, a low burning fire crackles quietly beneath the circular tuno, sending lazy wisps of smoke curling upwards, the perfect balance of warmth and fresh air. You instantly feel a different kind of calm here, a cozy sanctuary amid the vast, untamed grasslands. And it's not just physical comfort. The Mongols' deep, psychological connection to their yurts was woven into every layer of their nomadic identity. Historians still argue whether this emotional bond was rooted more in practicality or spiritual tradition, but your senses immediately pick up on the harmony between the shape of the space and the rhythm of life it shelters. The circular design offers no sharp corners, no divides, just a continuous embrace. Sitting here, you understand why Mongols considered the yurt a symbol not just of home, but of cosmic order, reflecting the eternal cycle of life, the sky's dome, and the earth beneath. Most castle dwellers could never claim such a relationship with their stone rooms, where cold walls and defensive battlements often kept people isolated or tense rather than comforted. Castles were impressive, sure, but their heavy construction and chilly interiors could never match the intimate scale and warmth found inside a yurt. Your fingers brush the felt wall, the fibers soft and resilient, absorbing and holding on to memories of countless conversations, whispered songs, and the everyday warmth of family. A surprising tidbit: many Mongol yurts included deliberately placed talismans, carved wooden symbols, and painted motifs that kept bad spirits at bay. Some families believed these protective charms were as vital as the felt itself. It's a reminder that architecture can carry not just physical, but metaphysical weight, anchoring people in a world far larger than themselves. The yurt's interior fostered close-knit social bonds. Families cooked meals over the fire, tending to milking mares and weaving garments, all in this shared space. Children played beneath the lattice walls while elders swapped stories, stories that connected generations to the vast steppes past and future. The spatial openness encouraged communication. No one was shut away behind a closed door. Contrast that with castles, where rooms were often isolated, hierarchies enforced by physical barriers, and privacy meant separation rather than communal warmth. Importantly, the yurt's portability allowed Mongol families to stay together even on the move, maintaining their social fabric rather than scattering members to distant quarters, as often happened in sedentary castles. This constant proximity reinforced loyalty and mutual support, qualities essential for survival and success in the harsh landscape. You might be amazed to learn that contemporary psychologists find such communal, circular living spaces beneficial for mental well-being even today. The Mongols were intuitively onto something. Their architecture and social structure nurtured a sense of belonging and safety that cushioned them against the chaos of nomadic life and war. Outside, the cold steppe winds may howl, but inside your yurt, enveloped by layers of felt and wood, you're cocooned in an environment that instinctively feels like home. You can almost hear the whispered conversations of ancestors who first wove these homes from the materials of the land, turning impermanence into stability. Historians still debate whether this psychological comfort contributed directly to the Mongols' remarkable resilience and adaptability, whether their sense of home on wheels gave them the mental edge in conquering Eurasia. It's hard to separate the human spirit from the spaces it inhabits, especially when those spaces are as thoughtfully crafted as the yurt. Interestingly, the central hearth was more than a heat source. It functioned as a ritual focus. The Mongols believed fire connected them to Tengri, the eternal blue sky, their chief god, making the act of tending the fire a sacred duty. This spiritual link between home, the divine, and community was woven seamlessly into daily life, giving the yurt a role beyond utilitarian shelter. If castles tried this, they'd probably end up with smoky rooms, moody drafts, and a few disgruntled lords complaining about the lack of modern HVAC. But yurts mastered ventilation with the Tuno's genius design, balancing smoke escape with heat retention. After all, a peaceful mind thrives best in a well-ventilated home, something even modern architects keep rediscovering. So, as you nestle into a felt cushion and close your eyes within this circular embrace, you realize the Mongol yurt is more than a war machine's mobile tent. It's a testament to a people who found profound peace in movement, a constant home in change, and a mosaic of stories stitched into felt and timber. And if you start feeling that cozy warmth sinking into your bones, well, remember this. The next time you're stuck in a chilly castle tourist attraction, wishing you had a yurt to roll up and take with you, you stand on the grassy plains, looking across the horizon where distant castles rise like stone giants from the earth, their walls gleaming stiffly in the sun. It's tempting to think the Mongols might have envied these steadfast fortresses, proof of power and permanence for their sedentary neighbors. Yet, the Mongols viewed castles quite differently, almost like puzzled tourists confronting a giant, immobile sculpture in a landscape made for movement. They didn't envy castles so much as pragmatically dismiss them. Historians still argue whether this attitude was purely practical or partly cultural resistance, but digging into contemporary Mongol accounts shows a fascinating mixture of amusement and contempt for castles. To the Mongols, castles represented static defense, heavy and slow to build, challenging to provision, and deadly traps if besieged. Imagine trying to tow a castle across the steppe. You'd need a cavalry of nothing but oxen, and even then, you'd lose the ability to quickly adapt, something Mongols prized above all else. The very idea of home in a castle was a fixed point, something to defend. The Mongols' home, the yurt, was the exact opposite. Mobile, lightweight, and meant to be folded up and carried, enabling families to follow the grazing herds or avoid dangerous winters. This mobility wasn't just practical, it was a philosophy of life, a rhythm tuned to the steppe itself. You might laugh at how castles required entire villages to support their inhabitants with food, labor, and supplies, whereas a Mongol family could pack up their entire household in a few hours, taking only essentials, furs, felt, food for the journey, the occasional pet camel, and of course their prized horses. The steppe was their supermarket, barn, and defense all in one. A yurt was simply the pivot between these elements. One quirky tidbit: during the Mongol invasions of Europe, there are tales, some exaggerated, that Mongol commanders scorned the stone castles as medieval relics that delayed their inevitable victory. They preferred rapid horse archery, open fields, and sudden attacks over breach and siege. Castles became barricades, trapping those who couldn't or wouldn't leave, fading into stories of futile resistance. Yet, the Mongols were not completely dismissive of castles. They adopted and improved siege technologies they encountered: catapults, trebuchets, siege towers, tools to breach these stone walls. They even incorporated garrisoned castles to control cities during their occupation and use them as administrative centers. So, while the yurt was emblematic of their identity and lifestyle, they did respect the strategic value castles had for controlling vast sedentary populations. There's a long-standing debate about whether the Mongols ever seriously considered settling down, establishing permanent stone residences themselves. Some evidence points to the brief establishment of administrative centers like Karakoram, but the consensus is that this was a practical concession, not a lifestyle change. The heart of their culture beat on the move, and castles just didn't fit. Meanwhile, the locals within those castles probably thought the Mongols were crazy. Why abandon sturdy walls for skin tents? But enduring harsh steppe winters inside dark, cold castles could sap the spirit. Yurts breathed warmth, light, and community. The walls closed in on castle dwellers, the walls literally and figuratively, while yurts opened to the horizon. One scholar's playful suggestion is that castles, with their rigid hierarchy and walls, represented an attempt to shut out the unpredictable wilderness, and the Mongols represented a wildness no stone could ever contain or hold captive. Their disdain for castles was less about architecture and more about embracing freedom that stones couldn't buy. And indeed, imagine the frustration inside a castle when Mongol horse archers appear out of thin air beyond the walls, striking unexpectedly before vanishing like ghosts. The static castle simply couldn't respond, less a safe fortress and more a prison cell in such a scenario. So the Mongols didn't need castle envy. Their homes themselves were defenses, offenses, and symbols of mobility, embodying a deep understanding that being able to move fast and light was more potent than the heaviest stone walls. From the yurt's easy dismantling to the horse's swift hoofbeats, the Mongols wrote a whole new chapter of survival, one where permanence was a liability and fluidity was freedom. And next time you tour an ancient castle, remember that while its stones tell stories of defense and siege, the real tale of conquest belongs to nomads with felt tents and horses racing the wind. You slink down into the soft grass beneath a vast blue sky, the wind teasing the sweet scent of wildflowers and burnt wood from distant campfires. Now, imagine stepping away from rigid stone walls and turning your gaze to the low, circular yurt nearby. Its felt sides rise like a warm whisper against the elements, breathing with you, bending with the wind. Beyond just cultural preference or mobility, yurts were also an ecological marvel. Historians and environmental scientists still argue whether the Mongols' choice of dwellings was a deliberate act of sustainability or simply the smartest fit for their environment. What's clear is that yurts had a minimal ecological footprint compared to the massive castles blocking distant horizons with their cold, unyielding stone. Where castles needed forests cleared for timber, quarries blasted for stone, and armies of labor to haul and assemble materials into forbidding walls, yurts were built from renewable components, animal hides, felt from sheep's wool, wooden lattice frameworks crafted from willow and poplar, all sourced directly from the surrounding steppe ecosystem. This meant local resources were reused with care, a bit like eco-conscious tiny houses of the medieval Eurasian grasslands. It might seem quaint today, but think about those medieval castles shrouded in smoke from endless hearth fires, trying to warm cold stone corridors. One crackling lodge fire in a yurt could provide all the heat and comfort needed. Yurts were incredibly energy efficient. The felt insulation was so good that one yurt could hold warmth for days, even through bone-chilling steppe winters. A quirky tidbit to savor. Some Mongol yurts employed a sophisticated ventilation system. The circular smoke hole at the top of the yurt wasn't just for light or smoke escape, it also regulated humidity inside, preventing dampness from accumulating, which could cause mold or illness. It was like an ancient version of sustainable architecture that even some modern green buildings struggle to replicate. Contrast that with castles whose thick stone walls, though sturdy, actually trapped cold air in winter and baked the interiors under summer sun, often leading to moldy chambers and an uncomfortable chill for inhabitants. Courtyards became muddy swamps after rain, while yurts could be moved away from soggy grounds in minutes. Granted, historians still argue over whether yurts' sustainability was a choice or born from necessity. Nomads didn't have the option of working for years at a stone fortification, but that simplicity ironically drove a highly sustainable lifestyle, one that many today envy in our era of concrete jungles and energy waste. The Mongols' minimal environmental footprint aligned with the migratory patterns of the herds and seasons. Grazing animals like sheep and horses shaped the landscape, and the nomads respected these cycles, not overwhelming any one area for resource extraction. Their yurts knelt lightly on the earth, leaving little trace once dismantled. A fun academic quip. Some environmental historians propose that the Mongol nomads' migratory lifestyle helped prevent desertification of the steppes, which heavy, sedentary agriculture sometimes triggered in neighboring regions. So, in a way, yurts symbolize a subtle balance with nature rather than domination. Of course, castles projected power by defying nature, massive stone walls crowning hilltops. But this stubbornness came at an environmental cost. Deforestation, soil erosion, and even local climate shifts from altered landscapes. Yurts, meanwhile, were a gentle footprint, fitting the steppe's rhythms instead of imposing upon them. What's more fascinating is that the Mongols' environmentally attuned lifestyle allowed them to thrive where many others struggled. Settlers who built castles often faced starvation after harsh winters due to over-reliance on stored grain, while nomads could shift pastures and times of movement to optimize survival. Their housing wasn't just a home, it was a tool for survival in balance with the ecosystem. Even the Mongol military camps adapted these principles. Their rapid mobility and temporary encampments caused minimal lasting damage. Stone castles, by contrast, marked a kind of environmental permanence, entrenching control but locking inhabitants in a set geographic and resource-dependent routine. So, while castle dwellers wrote laws on stone tablets and dreamed of eternal kingdoms, Mongol yurts whispered a story of temporary beauty and adaptability. It makes you wonder whether our modern attempts at sustainable living could learn a few things from felt walls and circular openness. Imagine how quiet the steppe must have been after the large armies passed. No rubble for centuries, just the soft imprint of a yurt's wooden frame and the slow return of grass. That's the kind of sustainable footprint that, if more widespread, might have rewritten environmental history itself. Now, while castles may hold the grandeur we picture when we think medieval, whitewashed with chivalrous tales, yurts remind us there's a quieter kind of power, the power to live lightly, flexibly, and harmoniously with the wild. And don't forget that odd ventilation trick at the top of the yurt chimney, which might just make you rethink how modern buildings handle humidity and airflow, proving that sometimes the oldest solutions still have lessons for us. As you rise from the grass, take a deep breath of that crisp steppe air. You're inhaling more than just oxygen. You're breathing in a history of balance, survival, and a life lived in sync with nature. The breeze carries a faint scent of felt and smoke, soft reminders of those round Mongol homes that once dotted the vast Eurasian steppes. Now, centuries after the Mongol Empire's rise and fall, yurts are far from relics buried in history. Instead, they live on, buzzing quietly through modern architecture and mobile living trends around the world. You might be surprised how deeply Mongol ingenuity still influences our housing ideas today. While historians still debate the direct transmission of yurt design principles through the ages, it's clear yurts have inspired contemporary architects, survivalists, and culture enthusiasts alike. In cities where cramped apartments and expensive mortgages reign, the idea of a portable, cozy structure is appealing. Modern yurt-inspired homes borrow those circular frames and layered insulation techniques for better airflow and energy conservation, fusing ancient wisdom with contemporary materials like aluminum and advanced fabrics. Imagine those tiny house fans whirring softly in a yurt-shaped domicile, sunlight pouring through the open crown, blending old and new. The quirky fact is that yurts have crossed cultural boundaries beyond Mongolia and Central Asia, finding homes on the roofs of Brooklyn skylines, in off-grid cabins in New Zealand, and even among glamping sites in Europe. It's like a nomadic spirit reincarnated as a hip, eco-conscious trend. You may chuckle thinking, how does a 13th century portable dwelling figure in with solar panels and Wi-Fi? But architects have designed yurts with integrated solar energy setups and smart climate control systems, turning these traditional tents into smart homes, at least smart enough not to freeze or overheat. Historians and anthropologists still argue whether this resurgence is pure nostalgia or a practical shift responding to modern environmental concerns and housing crises. After all, yurts' renewable materials and minimalist footprint hit several sustainability checkboxes, a trait increasingly coveted amid climate anxieties. Consider the whispers among architectural scholars. Could the future of urban planning include entire yurt villages in creative urban parks? Some cities in Mongolia and even Ulaanbaatar have started embracing modified yurts in artistic housing projects, blending heritage with progressive design, trying to solve contemporary housing shortages. Yurts also grow in popularity among camping enthusiasts and nature lovers who prize the balance between comfort and wild openness. The insulated walls and smoke hole ventilation make them far more livable than a conventional tent during chilly nights, while the rapid assembly means travelers aren't stuck with cold, broken down trailers or overpriced hotels. Yes, yurts have evolved from nomadic homes to modern, mobile luxury retreats. Interestingly, some tech startups in Silicon Valley have started pitching yurts as affordable, scalable housing solutions to tackle homelessness and urban sprawl. No doubt, this sparks lively debate among sociologists and policymakers about cultural appropriation versus practical adaptation, but it highlights the yurt's enduring relevance. The Mongol nomads might have never imagined that their humble felt tents could inspire a future where living spaces combine portability, sustainability, and even postmodern minimalism. You pretty much have to tip your hat to history here. Who knew these ancient swirls of felt and wood would fit so snugly into our 21st century dreams? At the same time, yurts serve as cultural symbols, continually reminding Mongolians and Central Asians of their pastoral heritage amidst rapid modernization and urban flood. The yurt isn't just architecture, it's identity wrapped in a circular embrace, tangible proof that history breathes in the present. And here's another cheeky tidbit you probably didn't expect. Some international artists sculpt yurts as multimedia spaces, projecting films and light shows inside these ancient shells, juxtaposing history with futuristic art. It's like an ancient geek out session with wool and wood. In that sense, yurts are canvases for storytelling and community gatherings, just as they were in the steppes, blending social tradition with contemporary expression. Historians argue how much of this is tradition versus innovation, but it's clear yurts remain vibrant cultural and architectural phenomena. So, as you picture this blend, a solar paneled yurt softly glowing under neon city lights, it's a beautiful paradox, a timeless nomadic structure thriving in a fixed, fast paced world. That's the magic of yurts and Mongol heritage, ancient practicality meeting modern imagination, weaving old and new in a warm felt hug. Now we slide into the realm where history blurs into speculation, a favorite playground for the curious mind and conspiracy buffs alike. Did Mongol yurts somehow inspire certain European fortifications? It's one of those fringe theories that make you pause over your late night reading, wondering if there's some hidden architectural genealogy linking the steppes' portable homes with the towering stone castles dotting medieval Europe. Before you picture Mongol architects secretly sketching blueprints for European castles under the stars, historians are quick to remind us that direct influence here is far from universally accepted. Still, it's hard not to entertain the tantalizing questions about cross cultural encounters during and after the Mongol invasions. The mainstream fact is that the Mongol Empire stretched from East Asia deep into Eastern Europe, bringing with it armies, culture, and yes, maybe even mobile lifestyle ingenuity. During the 13th century, Mongol forces appeared startlingly far west, shaking civilizations with their rapid horsemen and strategic brilliance. Some European observers noted the Mongols' use of felt tents, not castles, prompting local nobles to reconsider their own defensive strategies. Now, the quirky twist. Some scholars posit that certain roundels, or circular towers found in later medieval European castles, echo the circular shape of yurts, partly to improve defensive fields of fire, and partly to resist siege engines more effectively than square towers. Could this be architectural mimicry inspired by Mongol mobile homes? Historians still argue whether this similarity is purely coincidental, a parallel evolution in fortification design responding to similar battlefield challenges, or evidence of cultural transmission. After all, the steppe and European aristocracy had very different environmental pressures and military traditions. Adding spice to the debate is the discovery of Mongol siege equipment and some of their camp setups in archaeological digs in Eastern Europe, suggesting more than just fleeting contact. Think about it. If Mongols' circular, sturdy yurts could serve as easily erected bases for campaigns, could European engineers have thought, hey, let's make our defenses round like those tents? It's a stretch, but not impossible. Yet, remember that castles and yurts fulfilled wildly different purposes. Yurts prioritized mobility, lightness, and comfort in extreme climates, while castles were immobile bastions built mainly for defense and status in temperate zones. Historians sometimes wonder if focusing too heavily on structural shapes misses the bigger picture. Social, technological, and material factors often matter more. And of course, historians still argue here means some welcome the romantic notion of a Mongol architectural influence, while others slam it down with a nice story, but no evidence gavel. The jury remains out, sipping tea as the debate continues over which came first, circular towers or circular tents. A less serious but charming side note: some Mongol chroniclers described European castles as large stone boxes that seemed almost comically impractical compared to their own lightweight felt homes. They joked that Europeans were centuries behind when it came to cozy interior design, though admittedly with better walls to keep out invaders. Meanwhile, European nobles might have viewed the Mongols' reliance on mobile tents as evidence of backwardness, an amusing reality check on their own castle building obsession. The cultural arrogance on all sides sometimes clouds clear historical analysis. But beyond towers, could decorative elements or interior layouts of some later castles reveal steppe nomad influence? A handful of scholars point to shared use of circular hearths and central hearth placements in grand halls reminiscent of yurts' interiors, but again, this remains speculative at best. In the bigger picture, the Mongol expansion undeniably facilitated a massive exchange of ideas, technologies, and maybe even architectural concepts across Eurasia. This golden hour, or chaos hour, of cultural collision forced Europeans to rethink military strategies and possibly led to incremental innovations in fortification. You might imagine a jaded European castle architect rubbing his hands, trying to adapt Mongol efficiency without sacrificing the grandeur expected by his king. Theories propose that some circular defenses better deflected cannonballs and battering rams, hinting at a pragmatic evolution possibly seeded by Mongol tactics and even camp designs. Those who favor the fringe theory often cite vague similarities in terminology. The Turkic word kur, meaning a round tent, and certain European fortress terms sound alike, inviting linguistic speculation about long lost architectural exchanges. But linguistic resemblance doesn't always equal direct influence. Historians caution about false cognates and misleading parallels. It's also worth noting that Mongol camps often included wooden palisades and temporary fortifications, blurring lines between pure nomadic mobility and static defense, a hybrid that some theorize influenced later semi permanent European military encampments more than castles. The fringe theory often draws lively scrutiny in academic conferences, where you can almost hear the muffled chuckles over the fancy hats and tweed jackets as scholars challenge one another. Really, Susie? Mongol yurts inspired our keeps? Show me the blueprint. Meanwhile, archaeologists keep hunting for tangible evidence. A rare Mongol nail in a European stone wall might just settle the debate. Until then, we can enjoy the idea that somewhere, in the quiet nights under the stars, Mongol yurts and European castles engage in an unspoken architectural dialogue, the former lightweight, impermanent, and circular, the latter massive, permanent, and formidable. So, as you imagine those round towers and felt tents coexisting in some surreal architectural dreaming, remember that the story is as much about cultural perception and adaptation as it is about direct influence. And if you ever find yourself in a castle with perfectly circular towers, maybe wink at the history ghosts and say, "Thanks for the tip, Genghis."